Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Sin and Tonic. Today's story is that of Vikki Thompson. Back in the UK today, guys, let's go. Sin and Tonic! First of all, thank you so much to everyone that commented and messaged about my graduation. It was amazing. It was the best ever. I was so nervous, I was terrified, but it was wonderful. I'll have a little chat about it at the end, but thank you for the comments because, it was nice. Anyhow, today we are going to a village. It has a unique name. We are going to Ascot under Wychwood. Ascot under Wychwood. What a name. Ascot under Wychwood. Right? It's near Chipping Norton in the Cotswolds. Ooh. Ascot under Wychwood is the home to the victim in today's case, which is Vikki Thompson, her husband Jonathan Thompson, their two children Matthew and Jenny, and their dog Daisy. Ascot under Wychwood. What a name. On the 12th of August 1995, Vikki would go out at around 4 p.m. to take the dog Daisy out for a walk. This was a usual occurrence. She did the same thing every day, twice a day I think she walked Daisy, and she had lots of different walks that she would go on, but she knew the area very, very well. And like anywhere, especially if you live like I do in a village and stuff like that, there's lots of different places that you can go on a nice dog walk, lots of twittens and alleys and, little country roads that you can find and all the rest of it. But once you've lived somewhere for quite a long time, you kind of know the lay of the land and you know where you're going. So my point is, she didn't go somewhere and get lost. She went out and took her dog on a dog walk like any other day. About half an hour later, Daisy, the dog, returned home, but Vikki did not. So Jonathan found that unusual, but at first he thought, Daisy's a good dog, she's come home, and he assumed that perhaps Vikki had been caught up and was having a chat with somebody. Again, very usual thing to happen when you live in a village. You meet someone, you can't go out for a dog walk without meeting someone, you can't. I used to joke about it because we have a little Frenchie, he doesn't need lots of walking, and I would go out for, say, a 20-30 minute walk and it would take me an hour because you stop, you speak to people, you chit-chat. So he assumed that Vikki had been caught up with somebody and they were knick-knacking? Chit-chatting? What? They were having a natter. I think that was where I was trying to go with that. Jonathan went out looking for Vikki himself at first, and then the word spread that he couldn't find her. And the locals got involved, so people were out looking for Vikki. It was summertime, so it was still light, and because in the winter here it can be dark from sort of like 4:30, 5 o'clock, but this was the summertime, so they're all out looking. About 3 hours after Vikki had gone off on her walk, Jonathan then called the police and reported her missing. Sadly, it wouldn't be long after that at all that she was found. So she was found at around 7:15 p.m. by a couple that were walking along, and they came across Vikki. She was laying in her own blood. It was a really bloody scene. It must have been quite a traumatic thing to find. It appeared as if she had been attacked with the rocks that were found around her, and she had extensive head injuries. Her body, it looked like somebody had put her body there to make it look like she'd been hit by a train or something had happened on the train tracks, but it was also quite obvious that wasn't the case. It could also have been that the person was trying to sort of made some attempt at hiding her body, but it was a bad attempt. Vikki was still alive and she was going in and out of consciousness, and the pain that she must have been feeling, I can't, it's just awful. And because she just had such huge head injuries, she had fractures to her skull, and ultimately, because her injuries were so bad and where she was, the air ambulance were then called to the scene. So she was taken to the hospital in the air ambulance. She was taken to the John Ratcliffe Hospital in Oxford, and it was there that they discovered that she had 3 heavy blows to the back of her head, and she also had 2 to her face, and this had resulted in massive brain injury and skull fractures as well. Just awful. She was then put onto life support. Sadly, 6 days later, Vikki's life support machine was turned off because it was deemed that there was no brain function. Her injuries had been too great. The police told women in the area not to go out alone. It terrified the locals because, I mean, that is horrific, isn't it? That's something that just is out of a horror movie. It doesn't happen. Oh, it never happens here, that sort of business. Not every day that a 30-year-old woman is bludgeoned to death in the picturesque countryside. The police did have some ideas about the murderer, because it was quickly determined that the person that had committed the crime must have been a local, must have known the area very well, because they were able to get away undetected, and they knew you would have had to know the area. And I mean, that's even more terrifying if you live. So if that happened somewhere here, I'd be like, wow, I'm not taking the dog out, mate. Not for a while. They also, what evidence did they have? They had a footprint. So the perpetrator, because it was not Vikki's footprint, and it was like a boot print. So they had that near where her body was found. They had the rocks that were covered in her blood, and the fact that they thought it was a local. So the police go about investigating this case. They speak to all the local people, especially the people that were in the closest, lived or near the closest proximity of the where her body was found. And 3 witnesses came forwards, a farmer and others, to say that they had heard screaming at around the time that Vikki was probably bludgeoned. And they said that the screaming lasted less than a minute. And I think 2 of those witnesses said that at the same time they also heard a dog barking. So they heard something going on, and it's very likely that this was Vikki being attacked. Daisy then must have run home, terrified. There was also, get this, also something you don't see every day. An eyewitness saw a man, naked man, running through a field near where Vikki was found. Wasn't a body because she was alive at that point. And they thought nothing of it at the time. I'm laughing because they did think something of it, but not what, they didn't put 2 and 2 together until they saw the news about Vikki's death. And they thought, oh, and then they got in touch with the police, because that's, they've just seen a naked man around the same time in a field nearby. And police were wondering whether Vikki's murder was sexually motivated. Vikki had not been assaulted, but that doesn't always mean that there isn't a sexual element in a case. The release could have been, oh, what a grim way to put it. I can't think of another word there to put in, because all I can think is climax, but the crescendo could be the bludgeoning itself. Awkward. This information about the streaker, the naked man in the field, was not released for a while, a few weeks, and people were a bit cross about it, like, why didn't you say? Because when they had the description of the naked man, some people came forward to say that they thought it was somebody that they knew from the local area. Now, from what I've read, I'm a bit confused, because some people say that again, what it's like, well, you don't maybe, but if you live in a village, tongues wag, and the finger of suspicion was being pointed in a certain direction, and this person was called Mark Weston. He was 19 years old and he lived in the village with his parents. Now, he was described as a loner, and whether or not people just thought, oh, he's odd, what about him, could it be him? Also, I'm a strong believer in, that sort of gut feeling, that gut instinct, and enough people came forwards about Mark Weston to be, get yourself on high alert sort of thing. Red flag. He didn't have any violent criminal history. He did have some criminal history, but it was for theft when he was about 15. And then the police made a discovery, which when I was researching this case, I was like, oh, hook, line and sinker, mate. Got ya, right. They found a bag near to where Vikki was found, containing women's underwear in a bag. righty-ho. And they took that in as evidence and they tested for DNA. And whose DNA do you think was on the underpants? It was Mark Weston. Pair this with a naked man running through the field, eyewitness account, this bag of women's underwear with Mark Weston's semen on it, lovely. And, we can piece some pieces of the puzzle together here, can't we? Now, my very first thought on this was that he had been interrupted, shall we say, doing, whatever with the underwear by Vikki. And he didn't want his secret to be out. God knows, the thoughts that go through people's minds, like, oh, I'm going to, what gets you off? Oh, being in a field, naked, where I could be caught with a bag of women's underwear. Wonderful. Everything I read, though, suggested that they thought that Vikki would have confronted him. I don't know Vikki. Maybe that is the sort of person that she was. But if I did see that, I wouldn't confront that person. I would think that I would be scared of that person, and I would think I need to get away from this person. And then I can call the police, because also there was no mobile phones or anything like that. So again, nowadays, if you were up to all that business, you risk being snapped a photo of, don't you? Everyone's got a camera phone. But then it was really different. So there was no risk of that unless someone had a Kodak or whatever. But I don't think I would confront that person. I would get out of there quick and tell somebody, ring the police, but I wouldn't confront the person. But that was what the police thought had happened, and that's why he attacked her. But I just think, I don't know, obviously I wasn't there, I have no idea, but in my mind it was more, she stumbled across that and he thought, oh, no, you're not going to go and tell anyone. That's where my brain went. Anyway, what do you think? Let me know. Mark was arrested. He, in his interviews, again, he was a bit sort of like, it was said he was quite sort of aggressive, really, and he changed his story a number of times. I mean, that looks great, doesn't it? He said that he didn't know her, was nowhere near the scene. Then he changed his mind and said something else, that he'd been on a bike ride and something like that near there. And then when they told him about the underwear bag and his DNA, demon, I was going to say, I'm like mixing things up today, because that's a cross between semen and DNA. A demon, when they found his demon on the underwear, he then was, I was there and I was masturbating into this bag of underwear, but that's all, and I didn't even see Vikki. Right? So he changed his story a number of times. He went to trial in February 1996, and it is the most frustrating thing, because basically all of the evidence that they had was circumstantial. There was also a witness that said that she had a neighbour of Mark's who said he'd been in his garden most of the afternoon. She couldn't account for him all afternoon, but she said she'd seen him a lot. She also, and another neighbour also, said that they had witnessed him having a fire in the back garden in the evening time. And it is thought that he had burnt his clothes, although what was he doing, the naked man? Where were his clothes? Did he go back and get them? Don't know. Was he even the naked man? Who knows? What a coincidence if that was not him. Anyhow, so he was having a fire and burnt. They couldn't find any evidence that Mark had been at the crime scene. They had found boots that looked like a match for the footprint that they had found, but there was not enough of the shoe print to confirm that, and his boots were completely clean. There was no blood. And then the strongest piece of evidence, I would say, is the bag of underwear with his semen on it, CNA. So that was then not allowed to be used in court, because the judge said it had nothing to do with Vikki. What? Okay. So the jury never saw that evidence. So the bag that was found with his DNA on it, very near to where she was found, okay, that was not given as evidence. And then, if without that, you can see how it's a weak case, because it's just someone, possibly he looks like this naked man that someone's seen. You know, that is weak. And because of that, he was then found not guilty. Free as a bird. Bye-bye. Without that evidence, it was such a weak case that he was even encouraged to seek compensation for being, like, you know, hauled into court and charged, because there was so little evidence. I don't think he did go for compensation, but he was really happy to speak to the press. So he came out, he went back to, what's the place called? Wychwood one? Ascot upon Wychwood? If I've got that right, just from memory. Boom. Ascot under Wychwood. Sorry. Weston was more than happy to chit-chat away with the press and, you know, speak his truth. He was so unhappy. He'd been totally stitched up. Innocent. And, yeah, really sort of like mouthing off about it. And then what happens next is just, like, mate, just stop. Just go, just live your life. Live your life. Leave people alone. He hounded and caused mayhem for people. One person was PC Bob Salmon, and he was Weston's neighbour, and he was part of the police officers that, you know, when he was originally arrested, and the investigation into him about this murder. And I mean, the guy's just doing his job, mate. The guy was just doing his job. But no. Now, I read somewhere that Weston and his parents, they had chickens, and he killed one of the chickens and left it on this policeman's doorstep. But that was not the main issue. So he started harassing Bob Salmon, and 2 years after his original case, he was then in prison again, in jail, in court, again, for harassment, because he was ringing PC Bob Salmon, constantly ringing his house. He was making silent, you know, like on the phone. It was just, he was being scary, and also he does look quite scary. I know that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but we know what's happened, so, well, you will soon. And he was just terrifying the policeman and his family, his wife and his children. He was given a, restraining order for this, because he admitted, yeah, I've been pestering them. I guess in his mind it was just revenge. He also took revenge on his neighbour, one of his neighbours, Lucy, who had given evidence to say that she'd seen him in the garden. Now, her evidence wasn't damning. It was on his side, really. She said she saw him most of the day in the garden, and that was that. So there wasn't much to it, and it wasn't damning evidence. I don't get it. But he then became quite obsessed with Lucy, and it's almost a bit stalker-like. Well, it is. So he continuously put notes through her door. He didn't stop. It went on for a long time. She had 2 young children as well, so it was really scary. And he would go and shine at night. He would shine a torch in through her windows. So it's just these things that just terrify people. He was doing that. He then also was ringing her and doing the whole sort of silent phone call thing. And she eventually did go to the police and say, like, he's harassing me, and it is really dangerous behaviour. We know this. It's really, really dangerous, and I'm so glad that she did go to the police. And he did stop, and then he just was free to get on with his life, which he did. He ended up working in a bar, and in 2001 he met Helen. All was rosy. He was super into her, romantic, all the rest of it. Very sort of, from the description, was like narcissistic love bombing. Like, in, deep, quick, love you, infatuated. Oh my God. Like, sent her 200 or so messages one night. How much he loved her. Just a lot. The reason I tell you about Helen is because he sort of confessed to Vikki's murder to Helen. Helen became pregnant with his baby, and as you can imagine, the love bombing and this like, infatuation and Mr. Nice Guy, it disappeared. The minute he felt that he had her and that he had control of her, he then became increasingly more violent and nasty, until she feared for her life. There was an incident where he hurt her very much, and she had a baby with her at the time. He was strangling her and the baby was with her, and it was really scary. And she knew at that point that she had to go. She had to leave to save her life and her baby. And she did. But after that, he did not stop. He hounded her. He sent her horrible, horrible messages. He said that he was going to get people to kill her. He said that he would kill her. And in one of his messages to her, he said, "I killed her and I will do the same to you." Now, he didn't use her name, but she went to the police. She told the police, and this is where it was very frustrating, because there was a law at the time in the UK called double jeopardy. Now, that law meant that you couldn't be tried for the same murder. If you were found innocent, you couldn't be tried again. That was it. One chance saloon, right? So there was a lot of campaigning that went on, because that just seemed bonkers, and it is bonkers, because what's it called? Forensics and things like that. It just progresses. So and also, even without forensics, like, new evidence could be found. People could come forward, exactly like this case, where Helen came forward to the police and said, "I think he's just confessed to killing Vikki. Nothing we can do about it. He can't be tried again." It's just mind-blowing. I'm so glad that rule got changed, because it did, and it did in 2003. And then Vikki's case was looked into again, because it was a cold case, hadn't been solved, even though the police were pretty sure that that Weston was the culprit. And really what they did was go about trying to prove that he was the murderer. And they didn't have much physical evidence, but they did still have his boots. He had burnt his clothes, very likely, so that was a no-go. But they had the boots, and they basically took his boots apart, because his boots had been cleaned. When they found them, they were clean. There was nothing on them. It was like they hadn't been worn. Suspicious. So they took the boots and they carefully took them apart, because if they've been cleaned, what they were then actually looking for was in the nooks and crannies, and it really was. So when you look at, I'll share a picture, there's like a piece of the leather that goes over the top of another, like a joint in the boot. And when they peeled that apart, they found traces of blood. And when they tested it, it was a match to Vikki. They also found that where the blood was, it could only have been distributed there if it was wet. So therefore that placed Mark Weston at the crime scene at the time of Vikki's murder, when the blood was wet. Weston was arrested on the 21st of October 2009, and he could not believe it. He was what? I would have loved to seen his face. He could not believe it. Also, people said back in the day, it's my chair, sorry, I must get a new chair. He was saying, or a different one up here, a more comfy one. I deserve it. Anyway, they were saying that he came across like a man that had gotten away with murder, basically. He was like, and that was the way he was. And so he was very confident, cocky, and now he's being arrested, 2009. And then in 2010, at the age of 35, after many, many years of being a free man, Mark Weston would make history, because he was the first person, I do believe, to be tried a second time after the double jeopardy law was abolished. And guess what? With the new evidence, with the blood on his boots, with the bag of the underwear, and all of these things adding up and painting the picture, he was then found guilty. The judge allowed the evidence with the bag with the underwear in it, because the boots, that evidence of the boots with the blood, that placed him at Vikki's crime scene. He had to be very close to her for that blood, wet blood, to have gone onto his shoes. And also, therefore, to then have the bag of underwear that also had his DNA, had his semen all over it, right? To then have that as well, you need those two pieces of evidence. Like, he was there, his boots show it, and so does this bag of stuff. Grim, but it does. They paint the picture, don't they? They go together. So even though it wasn't Vikki's underwear, it still shows, it just is proving even further that he was there. And also likely why he attacked her. Mark Weston was given 13 years, and I think that reflects the fact that the judge it wasn't a premeditated murder, they couldn't prove that at all. It seemed very likely that she had interrupted him and then he had attacked her. So I think that's why it wasn't a full life sentence or anything like that, even though it was a really brutal crime. So he was given 13 years, so that means, oh god, the maths, that he was eligible for parole for the first time in 2023. I found some court documents that say that his next eligible parole is in 2004, so they do it every year, don't they? So he didn't get given parole in 2023. Good. I mean, what a dangerous human being to start with, and a violent man. And we know so much more about him now with the evidence that Helen came forward with about, you know, his domestic violence towards her. And yeah, so it just, I think he should stay there. So he went into prison at 35. It took 15 years. He was free for 15 years after murdering Vikki. So 35, 45, 48. He must be 48 or 49 at the moment. And now, at this point, he's eligible for parole every year. So I think a while yet, I would say. Anyway, if there's any updates, I will let you know. Ultimately, it is so terribly tragic for Vikki and her family. She had 2 young children, and she simply went on a dog walk. And whether she confronted him or not, we don't know that, and he hasn't said. But my gut tells me that she just saw something she really shouldn't have, and it was the wrong place, wrong time. Yeah, that's right, wrong place, wrong time. And because of that, she lost her life, and her children lost a devoted and loving mother, which is just very, very tragic. Cool. Oh, that's my dog. Oh, and that's another dog. It's like they're all talking to each other. So one of them's howling. Anyhow, that is all I have for you on today's very sad, very tragic case. I hope you can join me next week for another true crime story in a glass of wine or a jar of gin. I am so I'm still happy and buzzy about my graduation. It was a real full circle moment. I didn't get to uni when I was younger, and I have now. So I've done it. I've completed what I had set out to do when I left school and college. So I'm really proud, and it was so emotional. All of the graduates sat in the middle of the the place, and at one point we all had to stand up and everyone had to clap and stuff, and I just burst into tears. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, it was an emotional day, but it was really happy. I was so nervous, but my nerves kind of went away until I had to walk up, and then I thought, oh my gosh, it's just nerve-wracking, isn't it? But then the minute I got to the main man, what are they called? It's not the head teacher of the university, is it? What are they called? That person. Anyway, once I got to him, I was so happy. I was like, oh, this is it. This is the moment. Just enjoy it. So yeah, that's the smile on my face in the picture that I shared, was me just sort of like, oh my gosh, this is it. Like, yay, done it. So, good day. And we finished off with the Five Guys. Oh my God, it was so nice. But I'd had a glass of bubbles, a glass and a half actually, or a glass, can't remember, but had some bubbles, and I haven't been drinking for a while because of an issue that I had, anxiety, and then also I've had an issue with my stomach, and then I had that, and I can't touch it again. It flared everything all up. 1 glass of bubbles, right? Not that day, it took a few days, but I was like, oh my gosh, pain in the membrane. Anyway, but yeah, I'm glad I got to have a lovely Five Guys. It's really expensive here in the UK. I don't know if it is over there in America. I know that lots of you are in America. I've got people all over the place. It's wonderful. It's lovely. Sinners unite. Anyhow, so I'm still floating on air about that. Dog got some medicine for his ear today, for his ear infection. So, you know, things are looking up. It's good. Right, I'm going to love you and leave you. And I will see you all next week. Have a fabulous weekend. Thank you again for all of your messages. It was lovely. And I'll be back next week with another true crime video. Be good. Bye.